Professor Williams blocked my PhD applications, published my research as his own, and destroyed my academic future. Now he's unemployed while I run his old department. I never thought I'd be writing this story, but here I am at 2 a.m., unable to sleep because of what happened today. My hands are literally shaking as I type this. 3 years ago, I was a bright-eyed graduate student who believed in the fairness of academia. Today, I'm the department chair at one of the most prestigious universities in the country, and my former mentor just begged me for a job. Let me start from the beginning. When I was finishing my master's degree, Professor Williams took me under his wing. He was this brilliant, well-respected researcher who seemed genuinely interested in my work on renewable energy systems. For 3 years, I worked closely with him, spending countless nights in the lab, developing what I thought was groundbreaking research on solar panel efficiency. He would review my work, give me feedback, and I genuinely believed he was preparing me for a successful academic career. The first red flag should have been when my PhD application started getting rejected. I had applied to 15 top-tier programs, and every single one turned me down. Not even a waitlist. I was devastated. My GPA was stellar, my research was innovative, and my test scores were in the 95th percentile. Williams kept telling me that academia was just competitive, that I should try again next year, maybe aim for less prestigious schools. What I didn't know was that Williams had been systematically sabotaging my applications. Every time a program contacted him for a reference, he would give them a glowing written recommendation but then call them privately to express concerns about my mental stability and work ethic. He told them I was prone to emotional outbursts, that I had trouble working independently, and that my research ideas were derivative. Meanwhile, he was encouraging me to share more and more of my findings with him, claiming he wanted to help me refine my approach. The second year of applications was even worse. By then, word had somehow spread through the academic community that I was difficult to work with. Professors who had initially shown interest in my research suddenly went cold. Conference organizers stopped accepting my presentation proposals. I felt like I was being slowly erased from the academic world, and I had no idea why. The breaking point came when I saw Williams presenting at a major conference. I decided to attend virtually since I couldn't afford to travel. As I watched his presentation, my heart sank. He was presenting my research. Not similar research, not research inspired by mine, but literally my exact methodology, my data, my conclusions. He had taken 3 years of my work and presented it as his own groundbreaking discovery. I sat in my tiny apartment, watching this man receive a standing ovation for stealing my life's work. The worst part was seeing the comments in the chat, with other researchers praising his innovation and brilliance. I felt physically sick. That night, I called my mom crying, telling her I was done with academia forever. She didn't understand the details, but she could hear the devastation in my voice. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I had to move back in with my parents because I couldn't afford rent. I took a job at a local coffee shop just to have some income. Every morning, I would see my former classmates posting about their research positions and PhD acceptances on social media, while I was learning how to work an espresso machine. The shame was overwhelming. I felt like such a failure. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn. One day, while I was working at the coffee shop, this woman in an expensive suit came in. She was probably in her 50s, very professional looking, and she was having a phone conversation about renewable energy patents. Something about her conversation caught my attention, and when she finished her call, I approached her nervously. I told her I had background in renewable energy research, and we started talking. Turns out, she was a vice president at a major tech company that was looking to expand into sustainable energy. She was impressed by my knowledge and asked if I'd be interested in consulting for them. I almost laughed because here I was, taking her coffee order, and she was offering me a consulting position. That coffee shop conversation changed everything. Within 6 months, I was working full-time for the company, leading a team of engineers on solar panel optimization. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was doing exactly the research I had wanted to do in academia, but I was getting paid 3 times what a graduate student stipend would have been. Update 1. I can't believe the response this post has gotten. Thank you all for the support. I'm going to continue with what happened next because honestly, I need to get this whole story out. So I spent the next 2 years building my career in the private sector. The work was incredible, and I was finally able to pursue my research without someone looking over my shoulder, trying to steal my ideas. My team developed several breakthrough technologies, and I started getting recognition in industry publications. More importantly, I was happy. I was doing meaningful work, I had financial stability, and I was surrounded by people who respected my contributions. During this time, I occasionally heard updates about Williams through mutual connections. He had won several awards for the research he stole from me. He had been promoted to full professor with tenure. He was living the academic life I had dreamed of, built on the foundation of my stolen work. It still stung, but I was building something new for myself. The second major twist came about 18 months ago. I was at an industry conference when I met another former graduate student from my old university. We got to talking, and she mentioned that she had also had a terrible experience with Williams. As we talked more, a disturbing pattern emerged. She described how he had sabotaged her applications, stolen aspects of her research, and systematically undermined her confidence. This conversation haunted me for weeks. I started reaching out to other former students, and what I discovered was sickening. Williams had been doing this for years. He had a pattern of taking promising students, particularly women, building their trust, and then destroying their careers while stealing their work. I wasn't just a victim. I was part of a long line of victims. I knew I had to do something, but I also knew that going up against a tenured professor with my history of being labeled as unstable would be nearly impossible. So I started documenting everything. I collected emails, research drafts, timestamps, anything that could prove the timeline of my research development. I reached out to other victims and helped them document their experiences too. The breakthrough came when I found someone who had been keeping detailed records. She had saved every email, every draft, every piece of correspondence with Williams. Her documentation was meticulous, and it clearly showed the pattern of theft and sabotage. Together, we had enough evidence to build a case. We took our findings to the university's Research Integrity Office. At first, they seemed skeptical, especially since Williams was such a prominent figure. But as we presented more evidence, and as more victims came forward, they had to take us seriously. The investigation took months, but eventually, the truth came out. Williams had been systematically stealing student research for over a decade. The university launched a formal investigation, and several of his published papers were retracted. Professional organizations began reviewing his work, and his reputation crumbled almost overnight. The man who had been celebrated as a brilliant researcher was exposed as a fraud. The day I heard he had lost his tenure was one of the most bittersweet moments of my life. I felt vindicated, but I also felt sad for all the students whose careers he had destroyed. Justice felt good, but it couldn't give back the years of self-doubt and struggle that his actions had cost. Update 2. I'm amazed by how many people are following this story. Your messages have meant so much to me. I'm going to finish this tonight because I need to process what happened today. After Williams lost his tenure, I thought that would be the end of our story. I was wrong. About 6 months ago, I got a call that changed everything again. The university where I had originally wanted to do my PhD was looking for a new department chair. They had heard about my work in the private sector, and they wanted to discuss the possibility of me joining their faculty. I was shocked. This was the same university that had rejected my PhD application years earlier. Now they were offering me a position that would typically require decades of academic experience. They explained that they were looking for someone with both research excellence and industry experience, someone who could bridge the gap between academic research and real-world applications. The interview process was surreal. I found myself presenting my research to the same professors who had once dismissed me as unsuitable for their program. But now I was presenting as an accomplished professional with a track record of successful innovations and team leadership. The confidence I had built in the private sector served me well, and I could see their respect for what I had accomplished. They offered me the position, and after a lot of consideration, I accepted. I realized that I could use this opportunity to reform how the department operated, to create a more supportive environment for students, and to prevent what happened to me from happening to others. My first few months as department chair have been intense but rewarding. I've implemented new policies for student mentorship, created clear guidelines for research collaboration and credit, and established better oversight for faculty-student relationships. I've also made it a priority to support students who are struggling, knowing firsthand how devastating it can be to feel abandoned by the system. But the biggest shock was still to come. Last month, I received an email that made my heart stop. It was from Williams, asking for a meeting to discuss potential opportunities in the department. He had been unemployed since losing his tenure, and he was hoping to find work as an adjunct professor. I stared at that email for hours, feeling a mixture of anger, disbelief, and something I couldn't quite identify. This man had destroyed my confidence, stolen my work, and derailed my original academic path. Now he was asking me, his former victim who had risen to become his potential boss, for a job. I agreed to meet with him, partly out of curiosity and partly because I wanted to look him in the eye as the person in power for once. The meeting was scheduled for this morning, and I barely slept last night thinking about what I would say. Final update. What happened in that meeting today has left me emotionally drained, confused, and somehow changed in ways I'm still trying to understand. Williams walked into my office looking nothing like the confident, imposing figure I remembered. He seemed smaller, older, defeated. He sat across from my desk where I used to sit as a student, but now our positions were completely reversed. The irony was almost overwhelming. He started with what sounded like a rehearsed speech about his qualifications and his interest in contributing to the department's mission. I let him finish, and then I asked him directly why he thought I would consider hiring him given our history. That's when he broke down completely. He started crying, which was the last thing I expected from this man who had always seemed so composed and in control. And then he told me something that shattered everything I thought I knew about our relationship. He told me he was my biological father. I felt like the world had stopped spinning. He explained that he had had a brief relationship with my mother in graduate school, before either of them were married. When she got pregnant, they decided it would be best if he wasn't involved, since he was already committed to another relationship. My mother moved across the country, and I grew up never knowing who my father was. He said he had been following my academic progress from afar, and when I applied to graduate school, he recognized my name and realized who I was. Instead of revealing the truth, he decided to take me on as a student because he wanted to be part of my life and help guide my career. But then he made what he called the biggest mistake of his life. He became convinced that academia was too brutal and competitive for me, that I would be chewed up and spit out by the system. He thought that by creating artificial obstacles and challenges, he could prepare me for the real difficulties I would face. He thought he was protecting me by making me stronger. The research theft, he claimed, was never meant to be permanent. He said he was planning to add my name to the publications, but he wanted to establish the work's credibility first. He was afraid that if my name was on it initially, it wouldn't be taken seriously because I was just a student. As for the sabotaged applications, he said he panicked when he realized how much damage he was doing to my confidence. He thought that if he could keep me from getting into PhD programs, he could convince me to work with him directly and eventually reveal our relationship and help me build a career under his protection. Every word he spoke made me feel sicker. Even if I believed his motivations, the impact of his actions was devastating. He had stolen years of my life, damaged my self-worth, and forced me to rebuild my entire identity. His twisted version of protection had nearly destroyed me. But here's the thing that's been haunting me all day. I could see genuine remorse in his eyes. This wasn't just someone trying to manipulate me into giving him a job. This was someone who had made terrible decisions and was finally facing the full weight of their consequences. I told him I needed time to process what he had told me. He nodded and started to leave, but then he turned back and said something that broke my heart. He said he was proud of what I had accomplished, but seeing me succeed despite his failures had been the only thing that had given him any peace over the past few years. I spent the rest of the day in my office with the door closed, trying to make sense of everything. How do you process learning that your biggest professional enemy is actually your father? How do you reconcile years of anger and resentment with the possibility that his actions, however misguided, came from a place of love? I called my mom tonight. She confirmed his story, though she was shocked that he had finally told me. She said she had always wondered if I would cross paths with him in academia, but she never imagined it would happen like this. I don't know what I'm going to do about his job request. Part of me wants to reject it immediately, to make him face the full consequences of his actions. But another part of me wonders if there's a way to move forward that acknowledges both the harm he caused and the complicated emotions I'm feeling now. What I do know is that this experience has taught me something important about forgiveness, justice, and the complexity of human relationships. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who think they're protecting us. That doesn't excuse their actions, but it does complicate how we respond to them. I've built a successful career and a good life despite his interference. I've created the supportive academic environment that I wished I had experienced as a student. I've used my position to help other students avoid the kind of treatment I received. In some ways, his actions inadvertently led me to become the person I needed to be to make positive changes in academia. I don't know if I'll ever be able to have a normal father-daughter relationship with him. The professional betrayal cut too deep, and the lost years can't be recovered. But I'm grateful that I finally understand the full story, even if it's more complicated than I ever imagined. Tomorrow, I have to decide whether to offer him a position in my department. Whatever I choose, I know it will be a decision I'll live with for the rest of my life. But for the first time in years, I feel like I have all the information I need to make that choice with my eyes wide open. The strangest part of all this is that I no longer feel angry. I feel sad for both of us, for the relationship we never had, for the years of misunderstanding, for the pain we both carried. But I also feel strong, knowing that I survived his misguided protection and built something meaningful with my life. I suppose that's the real victory here. Not that he lost his tenure or that I became department chair, but that I became the person I was meant to be despite the obstacles he created. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.